This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. Here's your host, Cory Tusick.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. On this week's episode, I interviewed Bob Burnett. Bob's company, Barefoot Mining, does Bitcoin mining, so I wanted to get him on to talk about that because they do, different sizes, and then he had his article in Bitcoin Magazine about why Bitcoin needs more wild horse miners, meaning, there's different sizes and how true decentralization would come from having more people with, not just one miner, but, maybe 10 to 250 miners and more companies like that spread throughout the world in different jurisdictions. So we talked about that, talked about his company, and then also his background as he was the chief technical officer at Gateway Inc., which is, Gateway Computers. So, that kind of led him into Bitcoin. So we get into all that, and I hope you guys enjoy it. This episode is brought to you by Movies Plus, my streaming platform. Go ahead and check it out for free, 30-day trial. Just go into the App Store, search for Movies Plus, or go to mymoviesplus.com, sign up for a free 30-day trial. So there's Bitcoin stuff going up, but there's also, I mentioned this on a Twitter space, there's a movie on there called Jack of All Trades that I recommend you guys all watch, because Jack of All Trades is about a friend of mine who his dad was into baseball trading cards, and that market was booming in the 80s, and then in the 90s it crashed because guess what? They overprinted, and they printed too many of the rare cards, and it devalued everything. So sound familiar? So from a Bitcoin perspective, I recommend you guys check that out. And then it's also brought to you by Coinbeast Connect. Do you have questions about Bitcoin? Personalize your learning and book a one-on-one video call with a Bitcoin pro on Coinbeast Connect. Learn about mining, security, the Lightning Network, DeFi, taxes, and many other topics. It's really easy. Choose your topic and pro, select a date when you're available, and bring your questions to the meeting room. Book your first call today by going to coinbeast.com and clicking on the Connect tab. Be prepared for the financial revolution and get the knowledge you need. And I'll definitely be actually using that because I'm starting up some mining stuff personally and business wise. So I'm going to be a customer of that. I'll let you guys know how it goes. And you guys, I'm sure, hearing about how my whole setup starts coming together as we go along here and dip my toes into Bitcoin mining. If you want to reach out to me, follow me on Twitter at Cory_Tusick, and the Twitter handle for the show is at Bitcoin Simply, and you can email the show at bitcoinmadesimplepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. So when we were on the show together, Meister's show, Adam Meister's show, before we started recording, I mentioned the Steelers, which I'm proudly wearing because they're playing tonight. Are you and you said something about the Packers. Does that mean you're a Packers fan?
Yeah. Born and raised in Wisconsin. So very loyal, ardent Packer fan. Yes.
Are you still up in Wisconsin?
No, I live in Florida now.
Oh, nice.
My dad and my sister still live in Wisconsin. I have a lot of family there. So I guess, when you talk about home, that's home is still kind of Wisconsin to me. Yeah. So we us Steeler fans then have you to thank for TJ Watt. The whole Watt family, really. Yeah, TJ especially is fantastic, and you may not know this, but the Packers passed on him, and the entire Packer nation was in an uproar because obviously we knew what he was at Wisconsin, and very disappointed when he wasn't chosen. And but although he's even been better than I would have expected, he's fantastic.
Yeah. It was so for college, I mean, I'm a University of Pittsburgh graduate, born and raised in Pittsburgh, but I've been a Michigan fan for pretty much almost my whole life. And so when Michigan was playing, it was his senior year, and Michigan was playing Wisconsin. They both were in the 10 to 20 range in ranking. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, this TJ Watt is unreal. Like I thought, okay, he's JJ Watt's brother. How good can he be? And during that game, I was like, man, I hope the Steelers get this guy. So it worked out that way.
Yeah, good for you. Good for
Yeah,
you.
my son, my 6-year-old, absolutely despises the Packers more than the Ravens.
Really?
Yeah, and I think it's solely because when we played you guys this season, this was his first experience with, like, this is his first year that he's really getting into the games, and like he keeps saying to me, like, I can't believe I used to do other stuff while the game was going on. Like, now I get to sit there and watch.
Yeah.
So we were watching the Steelers play the Packers, and I don't know if you remember, but they blocked a field goal and returned it for a touchdown at the end of the half to take a lead.
Yeah.
And the referees called it back on a terrible offside. It wasn't
pretty questionable, I would say. Yeah. I agree.
And he was in disbelief. He said, "What do you mean it's not a touchdown?" And I was like, the referee said it was offsides, and he said they weren't offsides. I know. I said, sometimes I was like, more often than not, you'll find out that referees are terrible at their job. And so I think he doesn't like the color scheme green and gold, because he's like, why would you put those colors together? And I was like, I agree. And then second of all, then he goes, I think he holds it against the Packers that the referees made that call, because that was the first time that he was like truly in disbelief that something happened in sports. So now when we watch, it's like he always tells me, he's like, oh, as long as it's not the Packers, like anybody but the Packers.
Well, you have to tell him today that you spend an hour or so with a Packer fan and see if he'll forgive you.
Oh, he'll tell me that I can't believe you did that. So anyways, off of the sports though, and on to Bitcoin, and more specifically, we'll get into your background. So you're Bitcoin mining now and everything, and we'll get into that. But tell people about your background, and you were the CTO at Gateway Computers, which everybody's familiar with, the old Cal computers.
Yeah.
So how did you get into that, and how did that lead you to where you are?
So I came out of college in 1986 with an engineering degree, electrical engineering, computer science degree. Also, ironically, had also studied economics.
Wow.
So
you were a Bitcoiner before you even knew it?
Before I knew it, right. And in fact, what I like to say is, leap forward a little bit, is, when I believe, Austrian economics and technology had a baby, and it was Bitcoin, is what I like to say. But anyway, I got out of school and had 2 job offers. Interestingly, it was a tough time in the world in 1986 for those of you who are younger than me. Very, very tough time. So I only had 2 job offers, and one was with a company called Zenith Data Systems, which was a division of Zenith Electronics, the old TV company. And the other was with the National Security Agency, and I essentially would have been a spy for the National Security Agency.
Oh, wow.
So I always wonder, long story, it's a fascinating process that I went through. But I ended up turning down that job and entering the personal computer industry, and was fortunate to get assigned to a project, very junior engineer, on what you would argue was the first laptop computer ever created.
Okay.
And so very fortunate to have been, right there at the birth of something very exciting. And one of the neat things about being in an industry like the personal computer industry in 1986, very much like Bitcoin today, is that nobody cares how old you are. Nobody, nobody has more experience than you, right?
Yeah.
So I could be a 23-year-old guy, and if I proved myself and I was good at it, I was successful. And I think that's the same thing today. And if you're, and no disrespect to people in other professions or other industries, but that's not very common, right? If you're, you generally have to work your way up and
go up the corporate ladder and the hierarchy and all that BS.
Right. And so I spent 6 years there till 1991, at which point I started to get frustrated a bit by this corporate environment. It's just a Fortune 200 company at the time, division. And while we were very successful as a personal computer company in those early days, especially in the laptop industry, where we were the number one laptop provider in the world, 87, 88, 89, it was very difficult to innovate and create within that. And I had a vision, along with some of my other friends and coworkers, of really driving laptop technology to be smaller, thinner, lighter, those sort of things. Remember, at this time period, they're like 12-pound boat anchor sort of things. And so we had developed a plan to build a 1 kilogram product, 2.2 pound product that ran Windows, and which was kind of an exciting thing to have something that small that would run Windows in that era. And we couldn't get any momentum for it. Nobody would buy into it. They wouldn't fund it. So we left. We were fortunate to be able to raise about $15 million from Sanyo and Mitsui out of Japan, and get access to a manufacturing facility. And so we designed that product. And what ended up happening was we had the 15 million was enough to develop the product and build some initial inventory. It was not enough to create a brand and a distribution channel and all those things. So we knew our strategy was to private label it, and we started shopping it with the major computer brands at the time. And we were unsuccessful with the biggest ones at first, but found this company in South Dakota, Gateway, that they had a visionary at the helm. His name is Ted Waite, who later became my boss and good friend. He said, "Hey, I'll buy it." And so, make a long story short, I ended up, he liked the product and he liked me. And so, ended up making a decision that instead of Gateway was still pre-IPO. So it gave me a chance. So basically he absorbed my company, and we bought the product. The product was called the Gateway Handbook. Anybody wants to Google an interesting little product, it's called the Gateway Handbook. And so I went in there, initially led the development of the laptop business within Gateway, and that grew to about $1 billion division after a couple of years, and then moved up, eventually becoming the chief technology officer, and also ran all the international businesses. So at one point it was kind of a neat, it was neat in so many ways to be in an industry that was growing at that pace. Again, I think Bitcoin is following that same thing, but I ended up managing about 4,000 people at one point. I had a $9 billion P&L that I managed. So very cool to have that experience. But eventually, like a lot of things do, that ran its course. So my boss, Ted Waite, he eventually left, still the primary owner of the company, but no longer was active. Did not get along with the new CEO that came in. He would say I got fired. I would say I quit, but
sometimes it's the same thing, right?
Sometimes it was the same thing. And it's by the, it's interesting as you get, sometimes when you're younger, some people might say, well, if, there's shame in getting fired. There's no shame in getting fired. If you stole a whole bunch of money or something, then there's shame in getting fired. But, what you'll find is as you get older, like, hey, sometimes you're not philosophically aligned or culturally aligned or, whatever, go get fired. It's fine. It's a pathway to something new. So, and so I started a technology incubator on the heels of that, and we did several companies in the technology incubator, many of which still exist today, mostly in the technology space. And then that was in 2004, by the way, that I left, and did this incubator for about a decade or so, and then in 2017, so coming up on 5 years ago, I got a phone call late one night, and it was from actually an ex-Gateway acquaintance, and he said, "Bob, I'd like you to build some Ethereum mining machines for me. Can you do that? And my exposure to crypto, the world of cryptocurrency at that point was limited. And I said, well, why can't you just go buy one from Dell or wherever? I didn't really understand. So he said, no, you don't understand. And, he needed several hundred of them. He didn't want just one, he wanted several hundred. He said, I can't get anybody that could build enough of them at scale for me. And so I went out, did some quick searches, and sure enough, he was right. The only people building these would be GPU based rigs, in that era, were guys in strip malls and garages putting together what they called open air rigs, which means you take motherboards and graphics cards and power supplies and you zip tie them to wireframe racks, and horrendous designs. Terrible way to do it, by the way. And if you're a hobbyist and that's all you have access to, fine. But you can't build it at scale. You can't mine at scale with that sort of thing. So me and the guy who's now the president of Barefoot Mining with me runs kind of the day-to-day of my company. His name's Keith Thomas. He was the head of desktop engineering at Gateway. So we sat down the next morning and said, well, can we design these things? And said, yeah, we could. And it just so happened that a little piece of history, NVIDIA, when they were a startup in the early 90s, trying to find a customer for their graphics chips, Gateway was their first company to believe in them and design their chips. So Keith and I made a few phone calls back into the NVIDIA guys and said, hey, we need several thousand GPUs. Will you sell them to us? And probably a combination of owing us a favor and trusting us that we wouldn't gray market them or do something funky with them. They agreed to give them to us, and so we ended up in the business. We got the deal with this guy, and then we went to other people, and we said, and at that time we said, well, I guess we're back in the computer business. That was how we originally viewed it. It was very comfortable for us. Like, oh, okay, I guess we just started a computer company overnight. And so we started calling other people saying, hey, we're building these. Would anybody else like one? And the answer often was, yes, that's intriguing. And this might be a chiropractor who wanted 3, or a lawyer who wanted 8, or, the guy down the block who wanted 1. And they'd say, but we need you to run them for us. So, oh, okay. So we ended up getting in the hosting business about 2 weeks after getting into the computer business, because it was enabling us to sell more. And we were, honestly, it was very profitable. We were doing great. And we weren't really focused on the crypto part of it. Again, we were thinking of it in that mindset of a computer company. And then we started looking at the amount of money that was being produced for the people that we were hosting for. We said, oh, maybe we should take this profit that we're making, instead of putting it in our pocket, we'll plow it back into machines that we'll run ourselves. And that's what we did. And so we essentially became a miner at that point. So the first company, by the way, that made the computers was called Divi Systems. And the second company, which does the hosting and our internal mining, is called Barefoot Mining, which is actually the focus of the company now. And then as I got down into the rabbit hole, I realized that, Ethereum became less and less appealing to me. It made money. These machines kicked out money, but it became less and less appealing to me. Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin became more and more appealing to me. So we started using the Ethereum mining, at least for us. What our customers did was up to them. But what we did for us was we started looking at it as a way to make Bitcoin, right? Because we could either mine Ethereum and convert it to Bitcoin, or we could use a product like NiceHash for, we could talk about that later if people wanted. And they'll actually pay us, essentially renting your machine out to other people who will mine Ethereum, and they'll pay you in Bitcoin. So that's what we started doing. And then being unable to make our own Bitcoin mining machines, we did the next best thing, which is we reached out to Bitfury, which is probably the third biggest ASIC provider in the world, European based. And we're able to reach an agreement with them to become the US distributor and service center for Bitfury equipment. So it gave us that entree into, having access to that equipment. And that's our primary focus now. We're not exclusively with Bitfury. We do like their equipment a lot. It's designed differently than and probably a lot of people aren't familiar with it because it's typically not available. It's typically only sold to larger installations, but it's designed in a classic server manner. So those of you familiar with servers, it's a 6U format. So it's not that shoebox format like the Bitmains. So it looks like a classic server, and the ASICs go on cards, kind of like a GPU card. So like the unit that we're using right now, which is, it's called their B9, TARDIS Boost B9, has eight ASIC cards that operate independently. And so it's and it's upgradable. So it's another thing that's kind of cool about it. Their energy efficiency is not quite as good as Bitmain, though. That's probably the downside of Bitfury, is their energy efficiency is not as good.
Okay. Wow. So you go from making a computer and trying to come up, create a laptop that would be more, I guess, appealing to people. That sucks you into a company that is, Gateway, and then you're managing computers, and then all of a sudden, because you're a computer guy, you're like, yeah, we can make computers, and you find yourself in this mining world. So you're officially then transferred over to like all full Bitcoin only.
We still have the equipment that we designed in 2017 still operates. It's like 99.9% still operating. So we have thousands,
and those are specifically because you couldn't make an ASIC for Bitcoin mining,
but we use them to generate Bitcoin.
Okay, so you're just flipping. How hard would it be to turn them into Bitcoin miners? Is it? I mean, I don't know the technical side of that. So, is it just a lot easier to make a Ethereum miner, or?
Yeah, just the way, they run different algorithms, right? So Ethereum runs one algorithm, as probably everybody knows. Bitcoin runs SHA-256.
Yeah,
and we just, from an energy standpoint, which is really what it comes down to, it doesn't have, the GPUs don't have the ability to compete with the ASICs running the SHA-256 algorithm. So we do the next best thing, which is mine Ethereum, which we'll be able to do for some period of time. I don't know how much longer.
Until they switch over to the proof of stake and all that.
Some point, that.
And these are a lot of your customers. This is basically your customers bought the miners, and you're just you're hosting for them, right?
Correct.
Okay. So then go ahead.
But we have a bunch of our own too.
And
our focus going forward is a lot more. We're kind of de-emphasizing hosting. We'll do it on a select basis for people, but we're not trying to be Compass Mining. We're trying to create our own mining operations, and to the degree if we have issues raising the capital to do a new site, we'll bring in investment partners. But we're not just trying to host people anymore. Okay.
So I guess what made you become Bitcoin only? Because it sounds like business wise, you kind of have some of the Ethereum stickiness stuck to you, and you still got the glue on there. And it's much harder business wise to transfer out of that, especially because you can't make an ASIC that runs SHA-256. So what made the transition for you from, crypto to Bitcoin only, as far as your personal philosophy goes?
Well, I think probably no different from a lot of people. I started peeling back the onion first from the technology standpoint. How does Ethereum work? How does proof of stake work versus proof of work? How is the monetary policy implemented and controlled? How's the governance controlled? How are those sort of things going? And I just started to get this uneasiness about Ethereum and started to see the beauty of the way Bitcoin was constructed, and got more and more confident, especially in the decentralization. So I think when you get really down to it, Ethereum is not decentralized. Almost every alternative coin out there says they're decentralized. And then you look into them, and I try to keep up. It's hard, right? I try to read the different white papers. There's always at least one spot you go, it's
relying on somebody there.
Yeah, there is a point of failure. There is or point of control, maybe not point of failure. It's a point of control that can then become a point of failure. Failure either being disabled or controlled or manipulated or whatever. And some of them, they're maybe not terrible, but it's still there. So then when you go, well, what the world needs is money. It needs a reliable source of money. It needs a monetary system that we can all believe in. Those things can't be that. Maybe some of them will become something else. That's fine. I mean, maybe they will, maybe they won't, but none of them will be money. And whatever it is, there also might be that's beside money. Now you have to ask yourself, can what they're trying to accomplish also have been accomplished at a layer 2 or layer 3 on Bitcoin? So I just started to see that, and then as an economics guy, like I said, I studied economics in college, and I kept up with it just because I've always found it interesting. And I didn't learn Austrian economics in college. Nobody does, right? It's only
why would they teach you that?
Yeah, they would teach me that. But I did about 20 years ago stumble upon it. And before Bitcoin, I was already an Austrian guy, so by the mid 2000s and certainly by 2008, I was in, I was, on, and I was trying to figure out how the world could convert, because when you get in that world, it's a whole different subculture almost.
Oh yeah.
And, you get a lot of gold bugs, you get a lot of those sort of guys. And a lot of them had these elaborate schemes as to how the world would return to a gold standard, for instance. And I could never get my arms around that, though. I thought, yes, that would be better than what we have, but just practically, I couldn't see a mechanism by which we would ever get there.
Yeah.
But then Bitcoin came along, and unfortunately, I didn't find it till 2017, but at least understand it. I certainly heard of it, but I didn't understand it. And then I saw the way the monetary policy happened. I saw the way that money went into circulation, and that started to grasp what absolute scarcity meant, like those sort of things.
So then, so that's so you were Austrian economics then. You saw the disaster in 2008 and probably were screaming from the mountaintops, this is a mess. This is what you get for not, so then Bitcoin, then I'm not surprised then that you basically, as you started to dig into Ethereum and everything, you peel back the onion. It's interesting you say how you just start to see the holes in it, and as you start to see the holes in the other things, you start to see the beauty of Bitcoin. So then I want to get into also, that kind of leads me into your article, because so now we have this, a lot of people, even if you're a listener and you haven't fully gone down and peeled back all the layers of the onion, my belief is that everyone is on their path to becoming a Bitcoin maximalist. They're just at different levels and they're figuring it out. But when you get there, you all of a sudden you see this beauty. You're like, okay, we need to make this as decentralized as possible and protect it and everything like that. So it's interesting. You said that, how you kept seeing anything you looked at in other altcoins have a central control and you have a central potential point of failure. Now your article, which the title is The Crucial Role of Wild Horses in Bitcoin. And I recommend everybody read it. It's on Bitcoin Magazine. And so explain the thesis behind that. I could explain it, but I mean, explain it for the listeners from your point of view. Because I think it's really important with the, like you said, the centralization and making sure that we don't fall into that trap. The Bitcoin doesn't fall into that trap.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Cory. And I want to protect Bitcoin. And I think, all of us as a community have to be aware that things change, and we have to make sure that we don't fall into a trap. And in June of this year, when China banned Bitcoin, we saw a marvelous thing, which was we saw the resilience of the network. We saw 50, 60% overnight essential loss of hash power. And the Bitcoin network, with the exception of some slightly increased block times over a couple-week period, performed flawlessly and has continued to perform flawlessly. But it got me thinking about the actual construction of the network at a deeper level and where its exposure points were and what could we do now to make sure that we prevent issues from coming up in the past. China banned Bitcoin. They've never been public about why, but clearly it threatens certain things in their infrastructure and their vision of at least what they view happening for their country, if not the world. And they took this action. They said, well, if in the future a nation state or a group of nation states said Bitcoin is really threatening us, would they try something else? And we have to also consider that, let's say sometime in the second half of this decade, that Bitcoin is doing things like threatening the US dollar as a global reserve asset, that we see hyperinflation or accelerated inflation on dozens of fiat currencies around the world. We see governments starting to lose essentially their power, their ability to print money, and a lot of their power comes from that. We see things like the US, which has used the dollar's position in the world as a weapon to sanction countries or prevent commerce between countries. We see all those sort of things. If they lose those tools, they might not go quietly, right? So, with all that as context, they said, well, there's a danger in what's happening in mining. So mining, when Satoshi started Bitcoin, it was him and a handful of other people's having a couple computers in their home running and doing the mining. And if you read the details of his papers and his writings, you'll see that he never envisioned what we have now. Big farms, big sites, all over the network. He had a vision of kind of everybody mining at home. And by the way, he never used the word mining, interestingly. That was something that came in later. He didn't call them miners. He called them proof of workers. And the function of the miner and the node were combined in his nomenclature. So he didn't separate those two things. So when he would call them proof of workers or nodes, even though
it was the same thing. It did the proof of work and kept the ledger.
Right. So, he didn't see this. But if we fast forward to where we sit today is there's a huge shortage of ASICs in the world. And what has happened is if you're in the mining business, you want to be in the mining business, whether that's at the individual level or the large corporate level, you've got to, there's only the food, what I refer to as the food. The food you need is the ASICs. If you don't have ASICs, you're not in business. Well, the really big companies of the world, the foundries and the Riots and the Maras and the Bit Farms and places like that. And I'm not being critical of them, but they're going out right now. They have the financial incentive and the financial capability to go to the Bitmains and the micro BTs and the Bitfuries and say, I'll make a commitment. I'm going to buy 50,000, 100,000, some massive number of miners over this time period. If necessary, I'll even put deposits down on this stuff. And you give me a steady diet. Well, the ASIC manufacturers don't have additional capacity. They can't add, it's finite, right? And essentially they're buying it all. There's almost nothing left. And what they're doing primarily is taking those ASICs and developing mega sites. There's one right now, Riot's doing in Texas. It's a 400 megawatt facility. It's a mind-bogglingly big
mining facility.
Yeah. Mining facility. And so what I see happening is, and I call those the elephants. So we'll start talking about the animal nomenclature. We probably should. So I call those elephants, and I call the guys at home. If Cory, if you wanted to get into mining, you wanted to run one in your garage, I'd call you a rabbit, and I call the guys kind of in the middle, the horses. And so we have all the ASICs going to mega sites. Now, what we also have is these mega sites, because they need so much power, they're working often in a cooperative manner with the utility companies, wherever they are, or got in Texas, for instance. And while it is true, you'll read things like they're putting these agreements in place and they're providing stability to the grid, blah, 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 blah. They are also creating a dependency
on the grid.
On the grid. And so I call that being captive. They now are slaves to that power source. Okay.
Yeah. If the electrical company wants to, cut their, in theory, if they just want to cut their power, then they're out.
They're out. Right. They're done. They have no recourse. And they're in these massive sites that you can't just pick it up and move it somewhere else quickly. So, I want to say too, what I'm not trying to paint is what I think is the likely scenario. What I'm trying to paint is a possible scenario that we have to consider is a non-zero possibility. It's a real possibility that this could happen, but I'm not saying it's the likely one. So I don't want to create fear and panic. That's not my intent.
That's all Bitcoiners do, though. That's what I love about Bitcoiners is they explore every potential non-zero attack vector.
Right. And that's what this exercise is. This is a war games exercise of that. So now let's imagine 5-7 years forward. The elephants, what I call the captive elephants, meaning monster sites connected to the grid, dominate the network. Let's say 95% of the world's hash exists that way.
How much of it currently exists that way?
Nobody knows for sure. It's very difficult to establish it, but I would say we're in the 80% range. already
80%.
already dangerously large. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the charts, let's say we exit the year at 190 exahashes of power, and we exit next year at 300. Almost all the growth is in captive elephant sites. It's already planned, right? I mean, most of next year is already planned. So imagine a world 5 years from now, 7 years from now, 90, let's be dramatic. Let's say 99% of the world's hash is there. It's possible. And there are 100 sites around the world, 100 megawatt, 500 megawatt, gigawatt, etc., that are those 100 are comprised of those 100. Now, at some point, maybe there's a administrative change in the U.S. A lot of that's in the U.S. A lot of it's in Canada. Other places like Kazakhstan. There's still a fair amount of hash in China, but anyway, it's a finite number of sites now, and let's just say that those nations which hold it decide enough is enough. Our currency has been ruined, or our very power base of our government is
destabilized by this.
Yeah, destabilized by this. So send out the National Guard, go take over all those sites, cut the power. Well, let's play it out. I'm actually writing another article for Bitcoin Magazine. It's the follow-on to this one, so I'll foreshadow it for people here today. So, because we're going to talk about this scenario. Cut 99% of the power. What happens? Now, what I would do if I was, I'm providing a roadmap actually for somebody that we have to make sure never is even possible to implement. You cut the power, and you do it the second after a difficulty adjustment. So for those out you that are familiar with it, every 2 weeks there's a difficulty adjustment. So the Bitcoin algorithm says it always tries to get back to 10-minute block processing times. So it says, hey, we were running a little fast last time, so we're gonna, we were running at 9-minute and 42-second average block processing time. So we're going to increase the difficulty because there's more hash out there. Try to get it back up to 10,
closer to 10.
Back to 10 minutes. Now let's assume that difficulty adjustment happens. Boom. There's not another one for 2 weeks. Instantly, we cut power to 100 sites around the world, and we reduce the hash power by 99%. Block processing times will go from 10 minutes to days. And in the course of that 2-week period, we maybe process a handful of blocks. That's it.
And then, so then, I mean, wouldn't people just hodl in that scenario and say, okay, let's wait till the next?
Well, let's play it out.
Difficulty
but let's play it out. Okay. Now, so like I said, I'm providing a roadmap here. Okay. So that really sucked. People are afraid. We're not quite sure what to do. The difficulty adjustment happens. It's now got to be adjusted by a factor of 100. The algorithm, by the way, has no problem with this. This is very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember, we've just nationalized or taken possession. Nation states have taken over. If I'm them, I instantly turn on all that horsepower.
The moment the difficulty adjustment goes down by 100.
The difficulty has been 100. Now, instead of processing blocks every 10 minutes, we're processing every 15 seconds. And by the way, what I'm going to do is, because I control the hash, I'm going to process empty. I'm going to use all this hash power that I now have. I'm going to process empty blocks. I won't even pull anything from the mempool. I'm not even going to let any transactions process. I'm going to do that for 2 weeks. By the way, I'm going to, in the meantime, I'm going to win all this Coinbase, right?
Not the company, you mean? Yeah,
Coinbase is the technical term for the
Bitcoin,
block subsidy within that. Okay.
Yeah, just clarifying for people.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for doing that, Cory. So now, I mean, they're not in it for the Bitcoin though, by the way. They're in it to destroy Bitcoin.
To kill it, yeah.
To kill it. But now now what we've done is instead of releasing the coin into the money supply that we thought was going to happen in 2 weeks, we've done 100 times that. We've done like 2 years of release of Coinbase of coin into the market, and move forward to the halvening. Now that the end of the process comes again, soon as the difficulty adjustment happens, I turn it off again. And I go through these time periods and there's no way for the remaining 1% to do anything, right? So, I mean, at some point as a group, we'd probably have to it'd force a change in the difficulty adjustment algorithm. But by the time that happened, would have absolutely wreaked havoc and forced a confidence loss in Bitcoin because of that. So again, this is a war game scenario. So how do you prevent it? Well, you prevent it 2 ways. The first way is don't let the elephants control that much. And we require some cooperation from them and the ASIC folks to allocate a greater percentage of the ASICs to the horses and the rabbits. Okay, because they can provide that stability, number one. Number two, and this is where I focus in personally and for my companies, is I'm a horse size guy, which means sites of like 0.5 megawatt to, let's say, less than 10 megawatts. It's in that range. It's not an absolute, but it's in that range. And number two, we are working to generate our own power sources. So we're not dependent on the grid. We're not dependent on a power company. So my vision would be, if we have as a community thousands of horse-size sites scattered around the world, especially wild horses where the power can't be cut off, we eliminate the whole possibility of the scenario I just talked about. That if we can get 30, 40% of the hash power out of the hands of the elephants, we can get an appreciable amount of that to be what I call wild sites, which mean the power somewhere else. Now we eliminate that possibility.
Okay. So how much, you said 80% into the power of the horses?
No. It doesn't have to be 80%. I'm saying even if 30 to 40% of the world's hash power is rabbits and horses, then we're probably safe. Ideally 50%, but even 30, 40% is okay. Because we have the model of what just happened in China, right?
Yeah.
And so, but if it gets in this 90% elephants, 95, 99, now we got a real problem.
Yeah. And you said it's in the 80s, roughly?
Just my swag. It's just my swag. Yeah. And it's getting worse because as the hash is getting added right now, by the elephants are bringing in, let's say, typically 100 terahash per second class mining capability, individual miners. Those will go to 150 and 200 terahash units in the coming year. Very little of that technology is going to find its way, especially to the rabbits. I can get some of it as a horse. I have some relationships, but I don't have the financial capability, at least not right now, to go buy 100 megawatts worth that I'm going to spread out. I'm doing it 1 to 5 megawatts at a time. And there are a couple other companies trying to do the same thing. You guys read about, the companies doing flared gas implementations. But these energy sources, whether they're flared gas, stranded gas, hydroelectric, geothermal, wind and solar, maybe. I think those are not really that attractive to us horses because of their unreliability, but I think they will be popular with the rabbits. Guys who you've talked about having your own citadel, and so do you want a windmill? You want a little solar array out there? Maybe you do, and you may not mine 24/7. Maybe
Yeah.
Maybe you average 12 or 14 hours a day of mining. That's fine. That contributes. It's probably financially beneficial for you, and it certainly helps our ecosystem.
Yeah. So okay, so we need more of the little guys. And how is that, because so just exploring this myself, like an S9, maybe $400 or $500, something like that, and you're gonna make, I think, roughly $6 a day if you're part of a pool.
About right. It's about right.
Yeah. And the electricity cost is probably around $3 a day. So, I mean, it's not bad. You're making roughly $90 a month off of a machine. You recoup that investment within 4, 5, 6 months, something like that. And then you're generating revenue. So, but they generate a lot of heat. They take up space and make a lot of noise. You know, Upstream just came out with their black box, which obviously is pretty cool. But what's your recommendation for like the average, pleb out there that just wants to start contributing?
I think the black box product is fantastic, by the way, and I think the Upstream guys are going to have an absolute home run with that. So I would highly recommend people go look at that. The S9s, I think if you want to cut your teeth, go grab one. You can even buy that one right here. You can buy these little USB. You're not going to do great economically, but it'll get you exposed. These are like $250 from Gecko Science. So I'm installing a couple of those here in my house.
Plug those into the computer and they just run?
Yeah. You need you put it into a powered USB hub and off it goes. I've got 2 of them right here. I'm putting
that costs $250, you said? Yeah.
Don't look at the economics because the economics are not great. You'll break even over a year or so. But what you'll do is you have to do the same things to cut your teeth somehow. Right? I guess that's my advice to people. You'll learn so much by connecting them. How do you connect a miner to a pool? How does this whole infrastructure work? Just get exposed to it and get comfortable with it. Because I think we'll go back to what, Satoshi clearly viewed in the beginning, which really is the safest thing, which is this network is not run by big sites. It's run by several million of us running miners and nodes in our homes. That's the safest mechanism. So to the average person out there, go buy an S9, go buy one of those boxes from Upstream, and you can put it under your deck or next to your pool pump or something like that. Those are wonderful. I think what most people will find is after you cut your teeth and you make that initial investment, which may be hundreds of dollars, whether it's something like this or an S9, that you'll realize that you really want something more meaty, that but now you're talking a 5-figure investment. If you want an S19J or something like that, you're going to go spend 12, 13, 14,000 at least right now, because you got to go buy it essentially on the gray market. Or maybe eventually some of those will be available used. But that's the long-term thing. And like I said, for me and my company, what I really want to promote are these horse-sized sites, because I think that what's difficult is the rabbits, almost by definition, are still captive. So, because it's not practical for a guy with 1 or 2 units to also go make the investment to have his own power source.
Yeah.
On average, right? Typically that's not going to happen. But I can say, because I'm going to go put a container full of equipment, a couple hundred machines, let's say, on a given site that generates a megawatt. I can go say, well, I'll spend the couple $100,000 to develop the energy source too. Like for instance, if it's a stranded gas well and I want a megawatt generator, okay, well, like if I have to drill the well, that might be, depends on the well and all that, but let's say that's $200,000 to drill the well. And now I got to buy the generator or lease the generator. There's a couple $100,000 more, but the caveat is at the end of that equation, I have free energy. Yeah. So when you look at the long-term ROI of it, it's not bad. It's pretty good versus, oh, hey, I can just go negotiate a commercial rate and I can get 4.2 cents or, whatever the rate is. Look at how much energy you'd spend, let's say, over a 5-year period with 4-ish cents electricity. It's a pretty big number. And I now have a long-term free source of energy that I could go through multiple generations even of ASICs that I can turn over. So.
Okay. So, I mean, I think the best way to recommend for people, the average pleb out there, which we all are, and kind of what I'm doing is like you said, cut your teeth, and get the feel for the process. Because that's actually what I did with Bitcoin is I was like, all right, I just need to buy something enough to make me like sweat with the price, change, but like not so much that I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And so with mining, that's to me, the more often than not, when you're getting into Bitcoin, it's like, no, you just buy it and you just buy it and get into it. Now that, I'm at the stage that I'm at now, where I'm like, you know what, it is responsible. It's almost like, I mean, it's not the right term, but like a fiduciary responsibility to Bitcoin to participate in the mining and hash power, and, there were people out there trying to push like mining stocks, and that gave me like serious pause. I was like, whoa, no, just buy Bitcoin. And then I started thinking, well, you know what, though, you should mine yourself. You should, because let's just say you said a horse is what, somebody 10 to 250 ASICs running.
Yeah. Right.
So to become a horse, it really isn't that hard to do that eventually, to get there. If you start now with an S9, to everybody out there, if you buy an S9 for $300-$400 and it'll start making you a profit a year from now, then, or within a year, then you'll start to see, okay, I could add more S9s. And then all of a sudden your profit is up to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm going to take the plunge and get an S19. And then that takes you 10 to 11 months to recoup. And then next thing you know, you're buying more and more. And within 5 years, you are one of the wild horses.
Yes. Well, you're at least a horse, because then
you're a horse.
You're a captive horse, but you're helping. You're doing something very positive. And then, because that'll be harder, by the way. So even if you're a captive rabbit or captive horse, if it gets nationalized, you just think about the practical side of that. Could they really go to hundreds of thousands or even millions of homes if we're scattered out enough and say, hey, looks like you're running an S9 in your basement, we're going to cut it off. They'd have to almost go door to door to search for it. And they probably would catch some people. The utility companies do. For those of you who have done some home mining, sometimes you will get, like if you have a spike in your home, you'll get a note from the utility company saying, hey, just checking to see what you might be doing there. That already happens.
Yeah.
But
I think Adam O had the cops come out to his house.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. They were like, what are you doing here? Because I mean, I'm sure there's questionable activity that could be associated with a spike in energy consumption.
Right. I view it as an invasion of privacy, but we won't go down that.
Oh yeah. I mean, me too.
I view that as it's, what I do with energy is
personally, I like to run blow dryers 24/7. So I just plug them in and I just ramp them up.
Yeah.
I leave lights on.
I respect your right to do so.
Yeah, exactly. That's what a sovereign individual can do.
Right.
Well, yeah, no, so then it doesn't, within 5 years, you could be at least a captive horse. And then maybe another 5 years to get to the point where you're a wild horse. And it might happen faster than that, because if the price of Bitcoin appreciates like we think it will, then you should be able to jump. Well, I'll tell you what, Bob, I really appreciate you coming on, and I know you have a hard out, so I want to make sure we get to that. But why don't we maybe make this a part 1, so that whenever your next article comes out, we can do a follow-up.
All right. Awesome. Yeah.
Is that good with you?
That's good with me. Yeah. I always enjoy it. And
I think we
come back in a few weeks, maybe when I crank that one out I've already started it, and I should have it out before the end of the year. So.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I figure there's some rabbit holes there with like you said, the invasion of privacy and all that kind of stuff. But I think this is a good base layer for people to understand, how to get to that, to help protect the Bitcoin network. And like I said, it's not mining stonks or anything like that, where you're just giving money to other people. You're investing it in yourself, and in protecting yourself and the network.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not telling people what to invest in stocks or not stocks, but that said, one thing I will remind people of is that when you buy a stock, you're making a fiat investment that will ultimately pay out in fiat. So it may or may not follow Bitcoin's price, but you're really not participating in the system, right?
Yeah.
And if you're, I have nothing against any of those companies. Everybody has the right to pursue the business they wish to pursue.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But all else being equal, I think throwing some money at being part of the solution and helping prevent the problem that we've talked about here today is really important. And so I would really encourage everybody to just do something, right? Just do something.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the key, everybody. Do something. And get off zero as far as mining hash power goes. Get off zero in Bitcoin, but get off zero and mining hash power. Bob, where can people find you and check out your article and everything?
Yeah. So the article that Cory referred to was published on November 25th in Bitcoin Magazine. So if you scroll through the articles, you find it on November 25th. Best way to reach me is on Twitter, boomer_BTC. And I
like that.
Yeah. So if those of you just listening, I'm an old guy, so if you can't see,
you don't look old.
And I try to champion, for the boomers out there. There are some of us that at least I think get it and want to be part of the answer. And, not every boomer is evil. And that's why I embrace that in my name.
Eventually I gotta get you and Greg Foss on together. You guys would, he proudly talks about being a boomer. So maybe that'll be a discussion we got to have sometime.
Yeah. Greg and I spent 3 hours together. He's a place in South Florida now too. We actually just got together last weekend, and
oh, nice.
Great guy. And I'm sure we'd be happy to do one together.
We should do a boomer meetup, like just call it a Bitcoin boomer meetup, and do it on Twitter Spaces or something, maybe like that.
Yeah. Well, if you don't put it together, I'm sure Greg would be game, and I certainly am.
Awesome. Well, hey, Bob, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and we will we'll follow this up with another one.
Thanks, Cory. Thanks, everybody. Bye.